Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back in War Thunder and it's time to have a look at another devlog for another Japanese ship. This is the Karo-Tei Type 2, and I just want to say before we start this video, since this is the first one after all of the dev server stuff, that I covered quite a lot on the dev server, but there is still a lot of Japanese ships that I wanted to get to, and I hope that we get a second dev server just so I can have a look at that stuff. But in this video, I'll focus on the Karo-Tei. I'll be using some of the dev server footage as well, and also just to say thank you to everyone who has been watching the videos, and thank you for all the comments, especially on, obviously, the channel and on Discord. It's been very positive over the last week or so, and it does make a big difference, you know, to be optimistic, to be positive, and I just want to say thank you. So let's get into the Karo-Tei Type 2. What is this? Well, it's technically a subchaser. It's one of the first, what I would class as gunboats that you're going to run into in the Japanese tree, and its history is pretty modest. So this is actually a late World War II machine. Normally, you would look at this machine and think, well, it's probably either early war or maybe even 1930s, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of ships which are made for a specific purpose, and the Karo-Tei is one of those. This, as you can see from the section, it was a subchaser developed in the later stages of World War II. It became in service in 1944, and all it was designed to do was protect the naval bases at Okinawa and the Philippines from light Allied assaults and submarines in particular. So it only saw limited use, just like a lot of the Japanese stuff which was produced in 1944 and 1945. You can look at tanks or airplanes or boats. This is all the case because of the issues with resources, and also you could make an argument for mismanagement. But let's go into some of the key factors of this machine and why I think it will be fun to play, just because of its general playstyle. Remember, I'm coming from an arcade point of view. I play Naval Arcade mostly. Naval Realistic, I just feel like, is just a slower, more cumbersome game mode where you have less options because of how the aiming system works and also how the torpedoes work. So if we have a look at this video, which is my dev server video, I had a look at the whole Japanese forces, and you can see the Karo-Tei Type 2. It's right here. It's battle racing 1.7 in Realistic, probably the same in Arcade, and so the first thing to understand is no matter what happens, if you want to progress through the Japanese tree, you're going to have to research the Karo-Tei. So it's not one of these which is like over here, you know, kind of useless, the old, I'm going to christen it the Crusade ship with the crosses on it. But the Karo-Tei is going to have to be researched and played. Well, you don't have to play it, but you know what I mean. You are going to want to play it, because if you want to get into the higher echelons, which I'm sure a lot of people do, to get stuff like the Furutaka, the Fubuki, the Mitsuki, and also stuff like the Kako, which is a heavy cruiser because of its guns, but the main thing is you're going to have to go through this. So that's why this machine is actually interesting. It isn't one of those ones like the CH-8 where you can just kind of pass it by and push on. No, this you actually have to have a look at. So at 1.7, it does mean that you can build a lineup around it with 2 other PT boats, which is lovely to see. And this is what it looks like in game. So rank 1, battle racing 1.7. It's got a decent max speed, 48 kilometers an hour. The crew is only of 13, so that is a bit of an issue, but it is quite a small boat, and it's a low BR. So most boats at low BRs do have not a lot of crew, but also they don't normally own a lot of guns, which can be able to kill the crew very quickly. This boat definitely has the guns to be able to annihilate a crew really quickly, but at the same time, you know, it may have a few issues with aiming those guns. So one thing we also see at the lower tiers that does really well is a vast amount of guns. I know a lot of people don't like the early British Reserve, is it the MTB or something similar to that, with all the Vickers, the Lewis guns on them, and I understand why. but I actually enjoy the machine. And the reason is because you can put a ton of firepower on a target. As long as you are within a kilometer or 1.5 kilometers, you can put so much hurt down on a target because there's no armor here. And the amount of just weight that you're chucking at something is incredibly strong. That's why when I look at something like the Karo-Tei, I'm much more interested in the 20mm on the booty of this instead of the 37, which you find on the front. The 37 will be good for donking on targets, but the actual gun on the back, the 20, which has a high fire rate, it can get more weight out there, more burst mass, let's say, in over a minute's period than the 37 can, and therefore it's going to be more useful at lower tiers. Generally, the way I see it, or at least the balance of like high tiers and low tiers, is the fact that at low tiers, if you have a big gun on your, let's say you have a donkey gun, so you have like a 105 or maybe even a 120 or a 107, something weird like that, right? When it comes to it, the only use for that gun is to try and one-shot an enemy. And you see this a lot with the Soviet ships at rank 1. You see it with some of the, I suppose you could say the BMO class, but mainly I'm talking about the ones which are armed with the 85s and also the 76s. Sometimes you get lucky and you're just able to annihilate a target in one hit. Well, when you have a 37, and the 37 isn't that powerful. You know, we're having a look at the modifications here, and one of the advantages that is labeled for the Karo-Tei Type 2 is that it can quickly research AP on its 37. But at this tier, there's hardly any armor on anything, so why would I need AP? I would much prefer having HE, I would much prefer focusing on other stuff when it comes to upgrades, instead of that 37 round, because, well, I can still do damage with the 37 and I don't see it as my main gun. So it does get access, of course, to depth charges as well. One thing I'm seeing, which is incredibly prevalent in a lot of these Japanese boats, is they all carry so many depth charges, and I don't see this as a good thing. I just see it as something that's going to get hit by artillery or hit by a stray shell, and it's going to set my ammunition off. Like, there was a meta, and I'm not sure if it's still there, but there was a meta in light cruisers and destroyers. I know they reduced the impact or the chance of ammo racking, specific ships. But what you would do is you would aim for areas such as the torpedoes, because if you set a torpedo off, the whole ship would go up. And it's kind of the same way with ammunition blocks and also depth charges. And that meant that these larger ships, if you didn't have AP, you would try and aim for the torpedo blocks if they hadn't fired them out, to make sure to try, like, that was one of your only ways to deal with stuff like light cruisers or to deal with stuff such as destroyers. Now, the thing is, with that, is it's incredibly cheesy to be able to do, and there's also a way around it. So we saw this meta where people were trying to get rid of their torpedoes as quick as possible on the outset, make sure that they're in a good place, but it meant that it took away a facet of the game mechanics because of it. So for me, the depth charges are the same way. They are an interesting idea. I still haven't seen how they're used in a very positive way in the game, even the ones which have a launcher attached, the mortar attached. For me, I just see it as kind of a nice quirk to the game. If you've taken out a ship, you can kind of just plonk stuff in front of it. Maybe some of the really fast boats could really benefit from these, but the Type 2 is never going to, and it's just going to, it's just going to act like an exposed ammo rack to it. I haven't found a Japanese ship or a boat yet, which I would say is fast enough to be able to use these. And I'm talking about, when I'm talking about fast, I'm talking about like the reserve Soviet ship. That would be fast enough to be able to use depth charges effectively. But, c'est la vie, it doesn't have them. But anyway, let's push on with looking at this wonderful machine and all of its entirety. And let's have a look at the HE shell. Whoops. There we go. So the HE shell that is found on this 37 It has 0.65 kilos of projectile mass, and it has an explosive type of Shimose, and it has 63 grams of explosive mass. So it's actually quite a decent amount of explosive mass in it for a 37. And the only issue, as I said, is the fire rates. It pens a decent amount for a small HE shell with a good muzzle velocity, nearly 600 meters per second. This is why I don't think the APHE is as needed as is being portrayed here. The APHE will do a little bit more damage as long as the enemy has some armor, but at this level, at 1.7, you could risk the chance of the APHE just not going off. Now understand that in the Japanese tech tree, in the ground vehicles tech tree, you have some wonderful APHE, and a lot of the guns that you find on these lower tier boats do correspond to the ones in the ground vehicle tech tree. So I'm hoping that the APHE that the boats get is going to be as good as the ground forces ones. And I'm sure in a lot of cases it will, because the guns are either the same or incredibly similar or fire the same ammunition. And therefore, I am looking forward to seeing this one-shot ability on this 37 if it's available. But I'm much more of an efficiency person instead of a, I'm more of a let's put money into savings instead of get all the lottery tickets. And hoping to win big. So for me, when it comes down to it, I think it's much better to rely on the 20mm, that constant destruction of the enemy, instead of a 37, which isn't as fast firing. And you can see here's the, whoops, wow, I screwed myself here, didn't I? Right, here we go. We're gonna have to do it quickly. Bunk. There we go. So it has the same muzzle velocity. It is slightly bigger at 0.7 kilos, and its explosive mass is only 10 grams. So it loses the majority of its explosive mass. So even though this is an APHE, there isn't a lot of HE in it. It is the Shimose again. So the other one had around, 60 to 70 grams, and this has 10 grams. That's not good. But you do have decent penetration. So it may be worth bringing both. There are a few ships at lower tiers which do have armor, such as the Soviet, some of the Soviet battle boats. And if you get up-tiered, you're going to want to be able to pen them. But I think overall you're going to be okay with the HE. I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. I think it will be a completely fine machine at the end of the day, this little boat. It is the type of machine I personally enjoy. Something that is a little bit faster, something that does have a little bit more to it. Like if you strapped 2 or 4 torpedoes on this would be incredibly fun. But instead, it is set out a little bit by itself, where you only have access to the guns, basically, as an offensive armament. I think that the Japanese tree in general, it does have some really nice machines in it. Like if we have a look at some of the ones in the tech tree, whoops, there we go. Like there are some really lovely ones, and a lot of lower tier ones which look really fun. So this line looks great. The KaroTei looks good enough, as long as the 20 works well. The Type 5 CH2 CH8, these are your proper sub chasers. These look pretty fun, especially the Type 1944. This line looks fun as well. These are like your post-war PT boats, and then you have your destroyers. The only ones I'm worried about is like this area here, right? The AB Tai and the AB Tai series and the Seha Tai, and also maybe some of these as well, just because they're going to be incredibly slow around the battlefield and won't have access to they won't always have access to torpedoes. I think looking at the tree in general, it will be fun to use. A lot of people are looking at the higher tier machines, the Furutaka and the Kako and the Akizuki, and inferring a lot of hope for it. And I think that's correct to do. Japan is coming in strong in naval, even though some of its ships are not the best. At the higher echelons, which I keep getting told is where people want to play, It seems to be incredibly good and incredibly strong. And you are going to have to go through ships like the Karo-Tei to be able to get there. And it should be a nice little machine to play. Like, and nothing else really. There's, it's not like this grandiose, oh, look how amazing this is. No, it's just, it has some nice guns, it's got some good speed, doesn't have a lot of survivability, but then again, what does at this BR? Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Martinez, Matity, Moxie, Nito, Nick Graham, Alobralo, Sebastian Corona, Super Cacti, and Elove Goats and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.